Hello everyone. Before we get started with today's video, it would really mean a great deal to me if you guys would like, subscribe, and comment. We're going to go over some of the most famous 411 missing cases, and I hope everyone enjoys the video. In October of 1999, a man named Alan let his 3-year-old son, Jared, go on a short hike with a group of friends. They were staying at a quiet lodge he owned in Colorado, tucked near the Big South Trail in the Roosevelt National Forest. The group was made up of people from local Christian groups, friends, and families he trusted. Jared loved being around them. The hike wasn't dangerous. It was a popular trail. It was broad daylight, and it was the kind of place families went to visit all the time. And Alan had no reason to worry. Jared was happy. The group said they'd keep an eye on him. But just a few hours later, something happened on that trail. And from that moment on, nothing in Alan's life would ever be the same. In the fall of 1999, Alan was doing his best to raise his 2 kids, Jared and his daughter Jocelyn. He recently bought a small resort in the Colorado mountains. It was called the Powder River Resort. It was peaceful, beautiful, tucked deep in the forest, surrounded by trails, rivers, and mountains. The kind of place people get away from everything. He poured everything into that business. It wasn't just a job, it was a chance to build something stable for his family, for his 2 twins, Jared and Jocelyn. Jared was 3 years old, just like his sister. However, he was curious, full of energy, always wanting to tag along with the grown-ups. He wasn't shy like his sister, not at all. He talked to anyone, and he'd laugh with anyone. That weekend, a church group, friends from a local Christian single ministry, was staying at the resort. Alan knew most of them. They were kind of easygoing, his friends, the kind of people you don't think twice about. Jared, of course, was thrilled. He followed them, cracked jokes, asked 100 questions a minute. And the group, they loved it. They treated him like their own little mascot. It was, in a way, his second family. On the next morning of October 2nd, the group decided to take a small trip out to the Big South Trail, an easy, well-marked hike about 15 miles from the lodge. And Alan had to do some work at the store, so he stayed behind. But Jared wanted to go. He begged and begged and begged. His father, Alan, wasn't sure at first. His son was still just so little. Only 3, remember? But the group reassured him. They'd keep an eye on him, they said. It's a calm trail, no cliffs, no steep drop-offs. Lots of families hike it, and it would be totally fine. It would be safe. So Alan hesitated, but he finally said yes. He helped Jared into his little red jacket with a zipper that always stuck and watched him climb into the van, smiling from ear to ear. Alan stood there for a moment as they pulled away, thinking about how much his son was growing up. It was just a short hike, a sunny day, nothing to worry about. But within hours, everything would change. The group arrived at the Big South Trail just before noon. There were 10 of them, all in their 20s and 30s, packed into 2 vans, and Jared rode in the front, sitting on a booster seat between 2 women from the group. He spent the whole ride asking questions. "Do bears live in the woods?" one of them remembered him asking. "Yes," she told him, "but they're scared of you." He laughed. "I'm 3. Bears aren't scared of me." Everyone laughed with him. That's just who Jared was. Funny, fearless, and way too smart for his age. One of the men in the back leaned over and said, We should have brought walkie-talkies just to keep up with them. When they reached the trailhead, they helped Jared out of the van. He zipped up his little red jacket and ran a few steps ahead before turning around, arms wide. "Come on!" he shouted. "Let's go, guys!" The trail followed the edge of the Powder River, weaving through all tall pines and aspen trees. It was the kind of hike people brought strollers on, easy, open, with wide paths and no real danger. The walk in, a loose line, some ahead and some behind. Jared kept bouncing between both ends, running from the bottom to the top, darting around with the kind of energy only a toddler could have. A few people warned him not to get too far ahead. "Stay where we can see you, buddy," one man said. Jared gave a thumbs up, then jogged forward anyways. He is 3. But nobody was worried. They stopped at one point to rest along the river. A few people skipped stones, others pulled out some water bottles, a few crackers, some snacks. Jared was just there, maybe 10, 15 feet ahead, crouched near a bush, watching something on the ground. One of the women turned to grab her a camera from her backpack. She looked down for maybe 5 seconds, maybe less. And when she looked back up, he was gone. They figured he was just around the bend, maybe chasing a bird, maybe pretending to hide like he did back at the lodge. "Jared!" someone called out. No answer. A few of them fanned out along the trail. They looked behind trees, called his name, again and again, louder and louder, but the woods stayed silent. Still, no panic. Well, not yet. But after 10 minutes, then 20 minutes went by, and still no sign of Jared, the mood changed, and it changed fast. One of the men pulled the group together. "We're heading back," he said. "We need to tell Alan." The van ride back was silent for the first few miles until someone finally spoke. "What do we even say to him?" No one answered. When they pulled into the lot at the lodge, Alan was outside, sweeping the front steps. He looked up, saw the van, saw the faces, and dropped the broom. He already knew. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. Alan didn't waste a second. As soon as the group told him Jared was missing, he grabbed his keys and sped towards the Big South Trail. He didn't say a word. The whole drive just gripped the wheel tighter as he got closer. When he arrived, he didn't wait for anyone. He sprinted up the trail alone, calling his son's name into the trees. "Jared! Jared! It's Daddy!" But there was no sound, no response, not even the birds. The forest just felt off, empty, alone, like it was holding its breath or hiding a secret. Within the hour, the county deputy showed up, then park rangers, then volunteers. Soon the trailhead turned into a command center. Trucks pulled in, canopies went up, and dozens of people began searching the woods. Over the next 10 days, more than 200 search and rescue personnel were brought in. They used scent tracking dogs, thermal imaging helicopters, mounted units on horseback, and ground teams walking arm to arm through the forest. Even the National Guard assisted in this search. The search covered more than 50 square miles of wilderness. Yes, 50 square miles of wilderness. Trails, riverbanks, cliffsides, caves, everything was checked. Every inch was checked. The team went over the same areas multiple times, over and over and over again, not leaving a single footprint unchecked. Convinced they must have missed something, but they didn't. Remember, they used scent tracking dogs, thermal imaging helicopters, and mounted units on horsebacks. And arm to arm, they walked through the woods searching. Even the National Guard assisted. And this was a massive search. It covered 50 square miles of wilderness. Not 1 inch was unchecked. And this trail itself wasn't steep or dangerous. It was busy that day. There were other hikers, including two fishermen, who had seen Jared walking alone. They described him as calm and curious and not in distress. So if we remember, that lady was watching Jared on that riverbank. She went down to look at her camera. And when she looked back up, Jared was gone. He was vanished. In that moment, something happened. But after that sighting, he just vanished. He was gone. One of the search dogs caught Jared's scent and followed it for a while. It stayed strong up the trail, then stopped cold in the middle of the path. Nothing beyond that point. Not a single trace. That moment stuck with the search and rescue team. Dogs don't lie. If the scent just ends like that, it usually means the person was lifted off the ground. Again, this is a 3-year-old kid, so we can't leave any possibilities out of the question. The dogs followed his scent, and it stopped. However, there were no signs anyone else had been there. No vehicles, no witness, no struggles, just trees. At a press conference, one of the investigators told reporters, I quote, "We've seen cases where people wander off. We've seen drownings, animal attacks, even abductions. But this, we don't have a scenario that fits." Alan stayed at the site every day. He refused to leave. He joined the search himself, walking deep in the woods alone, calling out, hoping, begging. But days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months, and months turned into years. The search was scaled back. Then it stopped. It stopped altogether. And no one, not the searchers, not the police, not the family, had a single answer to where Jared went, or how a 3-year-old boy could vanish in broad daylight with dozens of adults nearby. 2 years have passed, and Jared's name faded from the news. The search ended, and no one had answers, and nothing had been found. Not even one single piece of clothing. Not a trace, like Alan disappeared. Still, holding out hope, his father refused to give up. He kept the resort, stayed in the area, and prayed that maybe somehow his son was still out there. Then on June 4th, 2001, 865 days after Jared vanished, two hikers were climbing near the top of a steep rocky ridge about half a mile above the Big South Trail. The spot was dangerous, rugged, and not part of the original search area. No child, especially not a 3-year-old, should have ever been able to get up there. But that's where they found something. First, it was a child's shoe. A teeny hiking sneaker, pristine, barely worn, sitting out in the open like it had just been sitting there. Then a piece of clothing. It was Jared's fleece sweater, laid flat. No signs of tearing, no blood, just sitting on the rocks. Then they saw what looked like a small fragment of a bone, and nearby, a small, weathered human skull. Jared. They found Jared. The forensic team confirmed the remains. It was him. But the condition of everything made no sense. The shoe, still clean, not torn, not dragged. The tread was barely worn, as if Jared hadn't even walked much in them. But Jared had been hiking all day when he disappeared. And the sweater? In perfect condition? No rips, no blood, no claw marks? Not what you'd expect if an animal had gotten to him. And the skull and tooth were found several hundred feet above the trail, in rough terrain that adults struggled to reach. So the question became, how did a 3-year-old, barely weighing over 40 pounds, get up there on his own? And if he didn't, who or what put him there? When Jared's remains were finally identified, the case was officially closed. The sheriff's department ruled that he'd been the victim of a mountain lion attack. On paper, that might have made sense, at least to them. Mountain lions do live in Colorado. They're fast, they're quiet, and they can carry prey up into remote terrain. But there was one problem. Actually, there were several problems. First, the location of Jared's remains. They were found 550 vertical feet above the trail through thick brush over jagged rocks and up a steep slope that search and rescue teams struggled to climb, even with gear. There was no sign Jared had made that climb himself. No trail, no torn bush, no blood, nothing. Second, the clothing. They were saying it was a mountain lion. When a predator attacks, especially ones that are violent, they usually involve claws, marks, and bite wounds and shredded clothing. But if we remember, Jared's clothing told a completely different story. His sweater had no rips, his pants were turned inside out. Yes, I said that right. His pants were turned inside out, which is extremely rare in an animal attack, but very common in cases where clothing is intentionally removed. Again, his pants were turned inside out, so we can most likely assume that his clothes were removed. And his shoes were particularly spotless, not dragged, not chewed. In fact, experts said that those shoes looked like they had just come out of the box. There was also no blood, and on any of the clothing there was no blood, and no signs that an animal had ever touched it. Third, the bones. Only Jared's skull cap and tooth were found. Can you believe that? Only his skull cap and his tooth were ever found. No other remains. To this day, 20 years later, no other remains. Searchers noted that animal attacks usually scatter bones. There should have been more, and yet nothing. So the official story was that Jared, a 3-year-old hiker, hiked miles up a steep, dangerous terrain, 550 feet up a rugged mountain cliff, without any adults seeing him, and was silently killed by a mountain lion without a sound, or struggle, and then somehow left behind pristine clothing and shoes in a place where search teams had already passed at least once during the original search. Okay, can we go back and remember what this search team was like? 200 arm to arm thermal helicopters, active horsebacks, like people on the horse searching, and nothing. The National Guard as well, and nothing. Even Alan, Jared's father, didn't believe it. It just doesn't make sense, he said in interviews. He said again, none of this makes sense. And that's where the missing 411 theory comes in. David Pilates, a former law enforcement officer who spent years documenting bizarre disappearances in national parks, added Jared's case to his files. And in his research, he pointed out that Jared's story checked almost every single box that appears in these strange, unsolved cases. The victim was a small child, usually between 2 to 6 years old. Check. The weather is clear and the trail is popular. Check. There is a brief moment where the child is out of sight, and then poof, gone. Check. Tracking dogs, and they fail. And remember, those tracking dogs stopped. The scent went dead, like he just was picked up out of the sky. Again, his clothing was found in strange conditions, inside out, neatly placed, clean. His pants were inside out. His shoes were fresh. And remains are found much later in an area previously searched, usually in terrain the victims should have been able to reach. Right? That 3-year-old is not going to be able to climb up the side of a mountain cliff, 550 feet. It's just like he's 3 years old. It's hard for most people with years of experience and the proper gear to climb it, and all of a sudden a 3-year-old's going to climb it without getting his shoes dirty, without getting his sweater dirty, with no blood. It's just, this case has a lot of things that aren't adding up. Some people blame human abduction. Others say it's animals. Some think it's something else entirely, something we don't understand yet. But what makes Jared's case so chilling is this. It doesn't just feel like something took him. It feels like whatever it was wanted to cover its tracks. And it almost did. After the remains were found, Alan drove back up to the Big South Trail. Not with the search team this time. Not with any hope left. He just wanted to stand in the place where his son had once laughed, and skipped ahead, asking questions about bears and bugs. He sat on a rock overlooking the river and said nothing for a long, long time. He told the reporter, I just wanted to feel close to him. One more time. That's all. He kept Jared's shoe, the same one found on the ridge, still clean, still intact. He kept them in a box because it was one of the only real things left. And sometimes, when he holds them, he wonders not just where his son went, but how something so strange, so impossible, could happen in broad daylight on a public trail with good people, clear skies, and no answers. And if it could happen to Jared, who else could it happen to? And what else is out there? I really hope you guys enjoyed this 411 missing case. And again, I'm just a small creator. I'm not anything big. I think I have like 36 subscribers. I'm trying to get better each video I make. And it would mean the world to me if you guys could like and subscribe and comment, help me with the algorithm, help me get, bigger reach, so more listeners and more viewers can enjoy my type of content. Again, I hope that you guys have a chilling night.